My name is Martin, as Paul just said, and I'm from Eastbourne, the mighty set on the south coast of England. Lovely, lovely place. And it's great to be with you all. And so each night, as they've said, we're basically interviewing people, finding out how Jesus has changed people's lives. And then I'll finish up then with a talk to kind of say, well, what does all this mean for us right now? So before we get going with the interview, I'm going to invite Renton up. And Renton wants to share a little few things with you guys, and then we'll have a little chat afterwards. Over to you, Renton.
Thank you, Martin.
So you give Renton a warm welcome as well.
Some of you are probably already disappointed. Well, he doesn't look very much of a tough guy, does he? Look a little fellow, like bald head. I'll put my glass on a little bit, make myself even less intimidating. But before we start, because by the time I finish my story, I think you probably will think, you know what, Renton, you did need saving. You was a bit of an horrible person. And that's being kind, really. So by the time you listen to this story, but that really concerns me because I think, because my Bible doesn't tell me that. You see, it doesn't tell me that I'm just the only horrible person. So I don't know how many people here. How many of you know the Ten Commandments? Any of you know the Ten Commandments? There's a few hands up there. So look, the Ten Commandments. I'm going to challenge you. I don't want to embarrass any of you, and I'm not doing that for that reason. It's just going to make me feel a little bit better about myself, because otherwise, I don't like myself half the time anyway, and you're going to think, phew. But so I'm going to just challenge you on three of them. I'm not going to embarrass you, but I want you to be honest here as well. Because the first one is, it says, thou shalt not give false testimony. Yeah, but you shouldn't lie. So, if you don't mind, hands up in here who's ever lied in their life. Wonderful. I wish I had my camera with me. I took photos of all these liars from Clifton and surrounding areas, you know. Anyway, so we're admitting that we've all lied at some time in our life. Now, you're going to hear in my story where I went out many, many times and took things that wasn't mine. You know, many, many things. And that's called stealing, isn't it? Thou shalt not steal. But you know something, you don't need to kick a post office door in to be a thief. You know, you've got to really think about this. You can go to work one day and get in a bit late, you still book yourself in for the whole day. You can use the stationery in the office, can't you? Ain't yours, or you use the office phone or something like that. So think of that as I say that. And so hands up anybody who's ever stolen anything in their life. Wonderful. Thank you for your honesty. And by the way, there was somebody who didn't put their hand up when I said hands up who's ever lied. But that's the second lie you just told. Anyway, we move on. You're also going to hear in my life where I went out on more than one occasion to take the life of another man. And if I had succeeded in that, I would have been a murderer, wouldn't I? But see, what Jesus says is a little bit different. He says, if you've hated in your heart, you've murdered in your heart, you see. So hands up, last one. This is the last one there. Hands up who's ever hated anybody in their lives. It's a strong word, but... So you've all openly admitted you're a bunch of thieving, lying murderers. I feel so much better about myself now. I feel like I'm in good company now. So with that, we'll start.
Oh, sounds good, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your honesty.
Great, thanks, Renton. We're all feel at ease now. We're all sharing our lives together. Beautiful. So we heard your Bedfordshire born and bred.
Yes.
And we can detect some Arsenal sense coming over from Paul here. Tell us, why Arsenal? I think it's an important question to start with. Why Arsenal? I mean, you could have supported Spurs.
Well, one of my uncles did, you know, and it was that bad I didn't even want him to come to my wedding, you know. My Uncle Tony, I did love him dearly, but he did support Tottenham. And one of my cousins, Vincent, and both of them are no longer with us, but I struggled, even as family, being a Tottenham fan, because that was, of course, they're the main rivals of Arsenal. My family are all East Londoners, East Enders, you know, from Clapton and Hackney and around that area there. So really, I should have supported Orient, really.
Yeah.
Orient should be. But my Uncle Elby took me to an Arsenal game in the 70s. And that's where it all started, really, for me, in the days of 1970-71, when we ended up winning the double for the first time.
Oh, wow.
10 years after Tottenham won the double, and they've never won it again since, as you well know.
Well, we did get a trophy last year, I believe. Let's not mention that, though. Anyway, great. So you're an Arsenal fan, Bedfordshire born and bred. And let's start with kind of young life. When you were kind of growing up, life was quite difficult when your dad sadly passed away, didn't he, age 14. Do you want to share a bit about that situation? Yeah,
it was a tough time, of course. My dad, at the age of 14, my dad, he got cancer. And what was real sad when I look back on it is that my mum and dad met in a real lovely way. You know, my mum, like I said, was from the East End of London. My dad was actually a Yorkshireman. He was serving for the British Army out in the Pacific on a place called Christmas Island, where they're doing a nuclear bomb testing. You know, it's actually been in the headlines again quite recently. And my mum and some of her friends wrote pen pal letters to soldiers. And my mum's one landed on my dad's lap. And so they started writing to each other, and then they met up in London when he got out of the army. And the ironic thing was that island was the place that he met, but it was that island that took his life, really, because he was riddled with cancer from the nuclear bomb, from the reaction from all that, and it's something that they're still fighting now to this day about taking some blame for it. They did award medals to my dad recently. I got the medal at home, which was lovely. But yeah, it was a tough time for me, and it was a time. I remember going to the funeral up in Luton, up Hitchin Road, up that way there, and I remember getting to there's a roundabout just before. I think it's an old building called Jansel House or something like that, and I remember being in the funeral car, and I'm crying my eyes out, and I'm sobbing my eyes out, and there's a group of lads there, 17, 18-year-olds, and they're all pointing at me, laughing at I was crying, you know? And it made me that angry, really that angry. And I remember that day promising at my dad's graveside I'd never ever fear anybody ever again. And you know, my dad was a tough man. My dad was a boxer. When he left the army, he was a professional boxer for a while, and then we moved out of London to Luton, and he worked in the car industry for a while. But my dad was a tough man, and he did discipline me quite toughly. And there was a few times when my mum would be saying, Harry, stop it, you're going to kill him. And he said, I'm trying to, woman, get off me.
Wow.
But he would, but I loved my dad. My dad was my hero. You know, I had this fear of him. And so when he did pass, I thought, I'm never going to fear anybody ever again. And these people had really triggered this for me, these youngsters who laughed at me and taunted me. And so that was really, I think, a little bit of a kickstart to my little man syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, a very, very angry person. I'd say I'd have a fight in a telephone box on my own, and it didn't really matter. I was a very angry person.
Yeah. And would you put that predominantly down to your dad dying?
I think a lot of it was. I think there was always an element of anger in me and frustration, or I mean, we know we talk about addictions, don't we? We talk about addictions, but violence to me become a bit of an addiction, Martin, if I'm honest with you. I mean, and really, you was asking me a few minutes ago, weren't we, before we started, about did you ever fear, what about the big guys? And no, that become even more of a challenge to me, even though I knew I was going to lose. You know, I'd pride myself saying I'd be the best second you've ever had. You know, it's that real mentality I had that I didn't really care, and I led my life like that for many, many years.
Wow. And so hooliganism obviously became a big thing. Obviously when you're at school, you didn't get a careers advisor come in and go, oh, Renton, yeah, hooligan, that looks like a good fit for you. You obviously didn't have that happen. So how did you get into it?
Well, it's funny actually, because I think the teachers did say something like that to me. I mean, I didn't really go to school much after I was 14, because my dad had died. My mum was very poorly, and so there was no money coming into the house. So I started working on a building site for some local builders, some ground workers, and it was a real weird thing. Me and my mum, we never spoke about it. She knew I was going to work, and I knew she knew I was going to work. But I'd go every morning with my school uniform, and in my bag was my work clothes. She knew those work clothes, she had washed them. And she would say to me, off you go, darling, have a good day at school. And she knew I wasn't going to go to school. And because I used to get £9 a day.
Wow.
And the only day we ever spoke about was a Saturday. And so I'd come in on a Saturday, and I'd put £54 on the table. And I'd walk out, and then walk back in, it was gone, because she needed it. So we never ever spoke about it. So really I didn't go to school. To the point that the school were writing to my mum, and my mum was hiding the letters before I needed to hide them. I mean, eventually they more said, look, we know what's going on. I mean, nowadays it wouldn't happen, with it, social services would be all over it, but they more said, look, we know what's going on, but what if we send some schoolwork home? Would you make sure he does that? And that's what we did, and then I went in for my few exams, and so I didn't really school. The only time they directed me towards anything was towards building, because I liked doing building, and that's eventually what I ended up becoming anyway, a bricklayer. So I remember doing a little plastering and bricklaying course when I was about 13, I think, in Luton, So that's the only thing. But the teachers, I think, a lot of them are glad to see the back of me, if I'm really honest. Yeah.
And so how did then, was it through the building site that you started getting into hooliganism? Was it contacts you had there? Was it people you met down the pub? Or
I remember the first game I ever went to actually was on my own without my uncles. I actually went to a Luton Tottenham game. And it was a nasty old game. I mean, the Tottenham fans would come in the Luton end, the Oak Road, I think it was in them days. That's where the Luton fans went. And it was getting quite messy. They were fighting everyone. I remember me and my mate saying, "Come, we better go a little bit early." And as we run out, we watched this Tottenham fan. Well, I don't want to be too descriptive, but he attacked this Luton fan. And then as we run down the road, this police dog come chasing up us as well. And that should have been enough to stop us ever wanting to go there again. But in fact, it lit it up for us. It was
so the adrenaline got pumping.
I remember saying, "My mate, he was 14." I said, "Another couple of years and we can be right at the front of all that, can't we?" And so that's how it all started. But I loved the Arsenal, so I wanted to go and represent Arsenal rather than Luton. And so I started going down to the Arsenal games on my own, jumping on the train and going down there, and then mixing in the right pubs.
Okay.
And then really to get accepted into it, you just become a very violent person. And as I say, without stating the obvious, I'm only a small guy, so the more violent I become, the more they welcome me in, and it's and that's how it really all starts. Really.
Wow. And so, what kind of things for those of us who've never been involved in hooliganism? What kind of stuff? What kind of violence? I mean, don't go into loads and loads of detail, but give us some examples of the kind of things you get up to.
Well, you'd always meet early. We'd arrange to meet early, and it was days before social media, so we'd arrange it the week before. If it's an away game, there was guys who would be planning a travel for us, and then we'd meet there. But the home games, we'd meet early into a little cafe in Seven Sisters Road, and then we'd plan our day of violence, really. And the ironic thing, has anybody ever... There's a guy speaking in Potton tomorrow, a guy called Simon Pinchbeck. He was an ex-copper and then he became a bit of a villain. And he was a copper down the Arsenal. And everyone had nicknames in him. His name was the Walrus. We called him the Walrus,
Well, was it because of his moustache?
He's had his big moustache. He's a big old lump, 6'5". He's the box for the Met Police, And so I knew him from that. But him and some of his other ones, they loved all the violence, and they would encourage the violence, So they loved the fact that they would more or less lead us to somewhere,
right,
where they knew that they'd more or less let us know if there's a pub there that's full of West Ham fans. Well, you go there, you've got X amount of minutes to do what you want to do, and then we're going to come behind you.
So it wasn't just a kind of fans versus fans thing. It was fans versus fans and fans versus police,
yes,
and police versus.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so you plan it in that different way. And London derbies, of course, are the big ones. Arsenal, Tottenham, of course, is the biggest. Arsenal, West Ham was one of them games that was going to change an awful lot for me and for the Walrus, the copper.
Wow.
Where it changed to a whole new level. The ICF is the West Ham firm,
right,
and they attacked Arsenal like a military operation. I've never seen anything like it. And that day a friend of mine got killed that day. One of the Arsenal guys got killed down the Holloway Road.
So did that not then put you off, or did that kind of encourage you all the more?
No, and the worst thing for me, Martin, I was married by this stage. I was married. I married at a young age. I met Wendy at a young age, and at school we met. Well, when I used to go back to school at lunchtime sometimes to play a game called Murder Ball at school. Another violent thing to do to impress the girls. And that's how I met Wendy. She was a couple of years younger than me, and so we married at a young age. And Wendy came from a Christian family. I normally describe it this way: her mum was a wonderful Christian lady, her granddad was a wonderful Christian man, a pastor of a church in northwest London, and her dad was a church attendant. And I think we'll just leave that there for now. It's a different story for another day. So my wife was going through all sorts of terrible stuff at home, and so she come away from church because she thought, well, if this is what church is, she was relating people's behaviour to church rather than relating it to God, you see. And we can all do that at times, can't we? We can look at someone and go, oh, he's an hypocrite, he's supposed to be a Christian. No,
he's watching Tottenham on the telly, what hypocrite. You know, do you know what I mean? No, but we all do. We all fall. We all fail. We've admitted earlier we're a bunch of thieving, lying murderers. So you know, I mean, so we're going to fail at times. And somebody from outside will go, "You're supposed to be a Christian. You're not supposed to behave like that." Yeah. So there was a hypocrisy for my wife looking at church and looking at family life.
Yeah.
And thinking this is not what I want. So she come away from church herself, met me. And then I took a lot of pride in sort of, I didn't want a Christian girlfriend. That wouldn't be very good for me, would it? It would be very good for my street cred to have a Christian girlfriend or Christian wife. You know, that's how my outlook was.
Okay. And did she know about the kind of things you were getting up to? And did your mum know about the kind of things you were getting up to?
I remember sharing my testimony for the first time ever, and my mum and Wendy were sitting at the front. And I said, look, before I start, I need to apologise to these two ladies here, because Wendy wasn't, she knew elements of what was going on. It wasn't just football, neither was other criminality, but my mum, it was like, whether she was in denial, you know, I was a little soldier, wasn't I? You mean he would do that, my boy. But so I remember apologising to my mum. I'm really sorry, mum, what you're about to hear. Like, you know, so there was elements I'm sure they knew, but
didn't want to talk about it because didn't want to go there. And so we're getting involved, you say, in other levels of criminality as well. Did it then? You were doing building and stuff. Did it ever spill over into work and other areas of life?
It did later on in life, and this is where my life started changing really. I have 3 sons, and I still have got 3 sons, thank God. I've got seven grandchildren as well, and you're thinking, you look too young to have 7 grandchildren. One of them 16 the other day. But yeah, so my 3 sons, and my middle son, he came into the building industry with me. I used to run I was a contracts manager for a big bricklaying outfit based in Dunstable, and we had a lot of people. And my boy come working for us as a labourer to start with, and then we was working on a job in London Colney, you know, not around St Albans way. And I'll never forget this day. It was a horrendous day, and I'd come away from football a little bit, if I'm honest, because the police were knocking on the door a bit too often. And they're very rude, the police. They never come at a sensible time. It's always about 3 o'clock in the morning they seem to knock on your door. And my wife has had enough of it, really. And I said to you, I won't say, my wife said to me, you know, Renton, I love you, my husband, but I don't like you. Don't like you one little bit. Don't like anything you're up to. Don't like the people you're knocking around with. But I love you, you're my husband, and I promise to stay with you. And that cut me to the bone, but it was the right thing to hear, you know. Yeah. And I was a stubborn idiot. You know, I didn't really want to hear that from her.
Did you kind of like give off the outward exterior that you didn't care, that she said that, or did you show you actually cared?
Yeah, I think I said at one stage that I've sometimes said I led a double life, you know, and I used to always think I was quite a good husband and dad and provider. I always provided, but the problem is when you provide is sometimes it's not coming from the right place, you know. You're putting money on the table and it might not be your money to put on the table, really, you know. So, and I remember years and years later, moving forward, which we'll go back to later on, but I remember saying to my wife a while ago, you know, Wendy, all in them days, them horrible days when I was still a good husband and dad, weren't I? And she went, no, you wasn't, really. You wasn't a good dad, you wasn't a good husband, no. You know, I said, but I always provided. She goes, yeah, but we didn't want that. We just wanted you. We didn't, you know, it's nice, the money and all that, but we didn't want that. We wanted you. We wanted you to be a dad and to be a husband, you know. And so that sort of thing. But so it was a double life. But this builder side of thing, you know, so I'd come away from football and just to really to please Wendy a little bit more. And so this addiction I had, where does it go? If it's not on the football terraces, where does it go? And I got this phone call one day from my son. He was 17 at the time. And all I remember this phone was him screaming in agony down the phone. Some guy in the building site had attacked him. And this guy didn't like me very much, you know, so this is his way of getting to me, I think. And so I remember ringing a good pal of mine and saying, look, what's happened? He said, you know, your boy needs hospital, I think. He's not in a good way. I said, well, but I was more interested in this fella. I said, who done it? He told me who it was. I said, where is he? He said, well, he's here at the moment. I said, well, keep him there. Right. And I planned very, very calmly, very, very calculated that I would take his life. And it was, we sometimes get in temper, we say, oh, if you do that again, I'll kill you. Well, I meant every single word of it for my shame. I meant every single word of it. Sorry with the some youngsters here, but I'm just saying this. I meant every word of it, and even to the point that I remember saying to my wife, I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. And she knew if I said I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it, Martin. You know, that was someone who, if I said I'd do it, I'm going to do it.
Was there anything in your conscience at that time that was going, no, don't do it? Or was it, do you think you'd done so much, you'd kind of so hard into it, you just didn't even, it's like, no, I'm doing it.
You can justify yourself, can't you? I mean, an awful lot of people can justify many reasons why they do what they do. Yeah. And I was very good at that, justifying what as far as I was concerned, he'd assaulted my son, he deserves it. I get people now say, well, right, and all, well, fair play to you. Well, not to the extreme I was doing it, you know, and I remember getting there, and the most shameful thing I think about it, my son was laying on the floor, and he needed me to pick him up and put him in the car and take him to the Luton and Dunstable Hospital. That's what he needed me to do, but instead I stepped over him, and I said to my mate, where is he? He said, he's there. I said, well, where's his car parked? Is he up in the top car park? I said, well, give me 15, 20 minutes and then send him up. And I remember going into this lockup where we kept all our tools, and I picked up a hammer and I picked up a can of spray paint. Anybody who works in the building site, ones you line them, you know, mark the lines with, and I thought I'm going to spray him in his face, and because the spraying thing, I said earlier, in the football, weapons started getting involved in football hooliganism at one stage, brought on by the Merseyside element. And the Liverpool fans, the Everton fans, the Tranmere fans, they started using knives a lot in Web. Mine doesn't sound so dangerous. It was a Jif lemon bottle. Never want some pancake day? I used to have one then, but what I used to do, I used to take the lemon out of it and I used to fill it with ammonia. And in that way then you could spray it into, the idea you sprayed it into their chest so they couldn't breathe. But you didn't really care if you sprayed it in their face or anything, to be honest. You didn't really care.
So that kind of incapacitated them, and then you could do what you wanted.
Whatever you wanted to do. So this spraying thing and this attacking thing was still in my mind. So I remember going up to the car park and waiting by his van. He had this little white Astra van. And waiting there, and I'm looking, and I rang my mate. I said, where is he? I told you to send him up. He said, I sent him home. I said, well, you can't have done his vans. He goes, no, I've got some other fella to take him home. I said, why would you do that? He said, because you was going to kill him. I said, I know, that's the whole idea. Surely that's the whole idea. You're my mate. Why? He said, no, it's because I'm your mate. I ain't going to let you do it. He goes, because you end up in prison for the rest of your life. And I was so angry with him, you know. But I eventually got there and I picked my boy up and I put him in a car. And I remember ringing my wife up and saying, look, it was starting to trouble me, this behaviour. You say about feeling personal about it, and all of a sudden that dawned on me that this guy who I was going to take his life was actually somebody else's husband, and he was somebody else's dad, and he was somebody else's son, wasn't he? Yeah. And I was going to just take his life like that in an instant, and it was troubling me. So I remember ringing my wife up and saying to her, Wendy, meet me at the hospital because I need to speak to you. And I said, he's going to be okay. We took him. He needed quite a lot of hospital treatment. He was in a bit of a bad way. And then I remember saying to my wife, I said, Wendy, I'm tired of being angry. Tired of being angry. And Wendy had been going back to church by this stage. She started going back to a church in London, in Rayners Lane in London. And she was, every Sunday she'd be going to church. And every Sunday she'd say to me, can you come to church with me? And I'd be going, no, why am I coming to church with you for? Because while she was at church, I could watch what I wanted, read what I wanted. Yeah. You know, why do I want to go to church with you for? But she'd ask me, and I knew she was praying for me because she'd tell me every morning, praying for you, I'm praying for you. Yeah, well, what do I need prayer for, you know? Yeah. But then I said to her, I'm tired of being angry. She saw that to the green light to evangelism, I think. She went, right. Renton, there's someone you can turn to. And I knew she meant Jesus, and I went, do me a favour. I've done a lot of stupid things, and I said a lot of stupid things. This is the most stupid thing I've ever said, and I want you to listen to this. I said to her, Wendy, I don't need Jesus. I just don't want to be angry anymore. But we all need Jesus. That's the whole message, you see, isn't it? We all need Jesus. We've all admitted that we fall short. God's word tells us that we fall short. And I just said to her, oh, do me a favour, leave it out. Don't start bashing on about Jesus to me. But it was troubling me, what she said to me. And I knew I needed to change. but I still wasn't willing to. I was still too stubborn, at that stage.
Yeah.
Far too stubborn to do it,
So Wendy, by this stage, had become a follower of Jesus, and she was praying for you, obviously, and trying to share with you the hope that she had found in him.
Yeah.
What next? Where did it go from there for you? Because you're starting to get troubled by this, things are starting to rumble under the surface.
Well, Wendy's granddad, as I mentioned earlier, Wendy's granddad was a minister of a church, and a year previous he had wrote a letter to all of his grandchildren and their partners, and this letter was the first time he'd ever evangelised to any of us. He was just a very gentle man, and he wrote this letter saying that I feel that I'm soon to leave this earth. He was not ill or nothing like that. This was actually a year before he died, and he said that, and I'm concerned for my grandchildren's spiritual well-being. I remember him writing those words, and he in this letter he put some little Christian tracts, these little booklets and things like that we see at the back there. Please do an old man a favour, give this some consideration, he sort of said, And with my wife straight away, that was the thing, that was the trigger for Wendy. And off she went, and we was away in down in Devon, and she was bashing on to me about this fella called Nicky Gumbel. He fronts a big church in London, HTB, and she was right. I've read this book from Nicky Gumbel, and Nicky Gumbel says this. I was getting young. I thought she was having an affair with some fella called Nicky Gumbel, because all she talked about was this Nicky Gumbel, and she and there's this and there's that. I mean, do me a favour, just give it a rest. Yeah. But these little tracts used to lay around our house, and when she went to church, I started reading some of them, and if I'm honest with you, they were making a lot of sense to me. And then she'd pull up on the driveway, and I'd quickly hide them under the settee because I didn't want to be caught reading dodgy Christian material. Again, it wasn't very good for my street cred. So Wendy's granddad a year later fell gravely ill, and Wendy moved back up to London to be nearer him. And I woke up one morning and I thought, if you have that feeling that you need to ring someone or you need to speak to somebody, if you have that feeling, do me a favour, act on it. Don't leave it, don't pull it off till tomorrow, or pull it off, act on it. And I had this feeling I needed to go and see her granddad. So I got on the train and I jumped off at St Pancras and went across to Euston. And all the way I'm thinking, what am I going to tell them when I get there? She's up with her auntie and uncle, all 3 Christians. What am I going to tell them when I get there, And so I thought, I've come there to help, support them a little bit. But I knew there was more to it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I get to the hospital, and there the 3 of them are there, right? They're just having a cup of coffee, and they said, what are you doing here? I said, I thought I'd come and support you a little bit, give you a little bit of support. Well, you're very lucky, they said, because he's been hanging on all day. He was told this morning he wouldn't live much longer. So, let me go and see him. And I went and saw him, and about a minute later he died. Now, they were all sitting there, and then the nurse says to me, he was waiting for you. And I'm looking at her thinking she's got 2 heads or something. What are you talking about? And then my wife said, he was waiting for you. And then they all start. I went, you're all nuts, all of you. What do you mean he's waiting for me? You've lost the plot, the lot of you. And no, he was waiting for you. Well, maybe he was.
Yeah.
And so I left that hospital that day quite troubled by what they'd said to me, Yeah. That was really troubling.
So yes, you had a whole series of things that were kind of building up and building up.
All little things.
Yeah, so you look back now, you can see kind of God's hand at work.
Yes.
And you ended up going to a funeral, didn't you? And tell us about that.
So we left Luton on this day, 17th of December 2002. I'll never forget the day. And I remember getting in the car, and we're off to Harlesden in northwest London. Lovely little. This building looks just like the church at the funeral. It's just the same size and
same beautiful
breeze blocks and beautiful. It's just absolutely stunning. Because you think we don't need to have fancy windows, do we, when we're in God's house? And I got in there and I put a CD on. I put Frank Sinatra on My Way. Because I said that was going to be my funeral song. Well, how cool is that? And my wife said to me, do me a favour. She said, can you turn that rubbish off? And I said, what's Frank Sinatra ever done to you? She goes, no, I don't mean that. She goes, I'm on about the words. She goes, because my granddad never led his life his way. My granddad led his life God's way. And I couldn't argue with it, you see. And I'm driving and I'm getting troubled by what she's saying. And I've been to many, many funerals over the years, certainly a lot of different people I knew, and you live that life long enough, you ain't going to live long, most of you. You'll be in prison, you're going to die young. And I've been to lots of funerals, like, and I've listened to ministers trying to say something nice about somebody that there was nothing nice to say about them. And by the time I got to this church, it was as if there's a screen up in this church. There actually was. It was up on that side of the wall there, as if they were showing my life on that screen. I had this severe case of paranoia that everybody knew everything about me. To the point that I started arguing with my wife. And I said to her, what have you been telling these people about me? And she goes, what? And I remember her saying to me, Renton, for once, this isn't about you today. This is my granddad's day. And we're not talking about you. What's the matter with you? But that's how I felt. I really felt that everybody knew everything about me. And they were all looking at me funny. They weren't really, it's all in my head. But it got to the point, I was sitting back near the front, because the family was sitting near the front. I wanted to hide under the chair, Mike. That's how bad it felt, you know. And then these people stood up and started speaking. Her uncle stood up, lovely Christian man, lovely man. And he started speaking with real pride about his dad. I thought, wow, that's amazing. Because everything he said about his dad was true, you see.
Yeah, it's a kind of genuine kind of comments.
Complete truth. This man was a man who didn't get angry, he didn't judge. He was just a wonderful man of God. And then the minister stood up and spoke. And I don't remember what he really spoke about that day, but what I do remember is at the end he threw 3 challenges down that day. And he said, the first challenge is to all the members of this church. And it was a very old church with lots of old people in it. He said, this was never Fred Davies' house, which that was Wendy's granddad's name. This was God's house, and maybe you relied on Fred far too much. He is now with his Father in heaven. You need to carry on. You need to pick up that baton and carry on. And I saw all these people nodding in agreement, and I'm just thinking, Then he said, the second challenge was for the Christian people. He says, listen, as Christians, if we truly believe that if we die, we go to heaven, then why aren't we celebrating? Yes, we'll have tears. Of course we're going to have tears. But we should be celebrating. We should be celebrating this man's life. And I saw them all nodding again, and my wife's nodding. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's the matter? As far as I'm concerned, you died, you died. And then he said, finally, he said, the third challenge is anybody in this room, and this is really worth us all listening to. Do you remember that when the lottery first came out and they had that big hand come out and they went, it's you. Well, it felt like also I had this big finger over my head, and it was, as far as I'm concerned, they were talking to me and nobody else. And he said, if you truly believe, or you don't believe, that Jesus came to this world, he led a perfect life, he died on the cross, he rose 3 days later so that you could all have eternal life, he said. That's fine, don't believe it, he said. But let me ask you a question, where do you think you go when you die? Well, with that, I jumped up and I tried to run.
Wow.
You
literally got
up.
So
my wife,
head,
Wendy grabbed me by the arm, she goes, sit down, you're making a show of me again, sit down. And I sat down and I think, I've got to get out of here. She goes, you've got... So we started walking out of the church, and this minister, Eddie Larkman, his name, he's a wonderful man. Wonderful. He makes me look big. He's a little fella, little round glasses. He made me look big. But that moment, standing at the door there, he terrified me. Give me a pub full of Millwall fans, no problem. This fella was scaring the life out of me because he spoke the truth, you see. And people sometimes can't handle the truth, can they? And the word of God, I've come to know, is the truth. And it says in the Bible that the truth will set you free. And I needed to be set free. You know, you don't need to be behind bars to be a prisoner, you see, do you? And I got to the door, and he grabbed me by the arm. And he said, you're Renton, aren't you? He said, I understand you've led a colourful life. That's what he said to me.
Very tactful.
I can't repeat what I said back because there's children in the house. And my wife was horrified. She goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe what you just said to the minister. It's something along the lines of get your hands off me, but a little bit more colourful than that. And I got outside and they're saying, come on, you've got to get in the car, we've got to go to the pinner, to the cemetery. I said, no, I can't go. And so Wendy's kicking off a bit at me for making a show. And then her uncle said, Wendy, leave him alone because that's the best I've ever seen him.
Wow.
He saw something in me. I don't know what it was. He saw something. He said, "Leave the poor man alone, people."
So he could kind of see what God was doing, even though at the moment you were just kind of a complete mess of what's going on.
Complete mess.
But he could see. Yeah.
He saw something. He just said, "Leave." Wendy digs her heels in. She digs her heels in. And I said, "Look, I'll meet you at the cemetery." And I remember getting a taxi and meeting them. And I think I got there before. And I spent the rest of that day just walking around. And people kept saying, "What's the matter with you?" And I'm going, all I could say was, "I've got it all wrong. I've got it all wrong." And I remember Wendy saying, "What do you mean you got it all wrong? What have you got wrong?" I said, "Everything." She goes, "What, me?" I said, "No, you're about the only good thing in my life. But I've got it all wrong." Well, when Eddie grabbed me by the arm, he said, "If you ever want to talk to me, come and see me," he said. And I thought, "I'll come and see you. You carry on the way you are. I'll come and see you." So I got home and I was troubled, and the next morning I said to Wendy, "Give me that name of that fella. I need to speak to him." And I was trying to make out I was going to give him a piece of my mind, but I was desperate to speak to somebody. And I remember ringing him, and I remember trying to put on a real tough voice. I was broken, I was in bits, and I remember ringing up and going, "Is that Eddie? Is that Eddie?" And he's gone, "Yes!" And I think, you saying yes for, you idiot? He usually says something like, no, here's a number of another pastor, a bloke called Nick, over in Clifton. I'll have a chat with him. But he said, I'll never forget, he said, "Renton, I'd love you to come and see me." He said, "Meet me at the Manse at 7:30 on Friday." It sounded like a big drug deal to me. I mean, like, I didn't know what a Manse was, you see. So I remember putting, I'll be there. Put the phone down. I said, "Wendy, what's a Manse?" She went, "Oh, Renton, it's another name for a vicarage. Just calm yourself down. Just go and see him."
And were you, at this stage, were you kind of trembling? Were you kind of still angry? What was going on in your mind?
I was trying to put this big show on in front of her.
But you were quite fearful inside. Massively.
I was absolutely in bits. Absolutely in bits. And I nearly tried to duck out of it a couple of times, and then she had gone to Friday, "Were you going to go and see Eddie or not?" So I drove up to see him, and I spent 4 hours with Eddie. 4 hours, we've only got a few minutes left, haven't we? But 4 hours with Eddie. And I told that poor man every single thing I'd ever done in my life. And sometimes I ring him up and apologise to him now, so I'm sorry for how I burdened you with that. Because I couldn't share some of that stuff ever again. And all I remember Eddie looking at me, he went, "Wow." He said, "I don't know what you learned today, Renton." He said, "But what you told me I thought only happened in films, really." He said, "But one thing for certain," he said, "God's working in your life." I went, "Oh, all right, okay." Didn't have a clue what that meant. Didn't have a Scooby what that meant at all. And I remember then getting in the car and driving home, ringing Wendy, and she's all excited. "What's he say?" I said, "He says God's working in my life." She goes, "Isn't that wonderful?" I went, "I don't know. I don't know what it means," he said. And I got home, and I said, "What do I do now?" You know, I felt completely like a duck out of water. I said, "What do I do?" She went, "I don't know, start reading your Bible." I said, "I ain't got a Bible." See, Bible for me at my school meant punishment in my school. Because when I was naughty, which I was all the time, in religious education there was a teacher, we used to call him Holy Joe. And he used to make me stand in a crucifix position with two Bibles.
Oh, wow.
And if my arm dropped, he hit me over the head with another Bible. So that's what the Bible meant to me. So I never had a
real Bible basher.
Literally a Bible basher.
Yeah.
And he, so she said, "Well, read my Bible." So I remember getting it out and looking at my Bible. And I'm flicking through, and there's Deuteronomy and Leviticus and Numbers, and I think, "What's all this?" I couldn't hardly say the word. And then I found this book called Timothy. And the only reason I read Timothy was because I knew a kid at school called Timothy. I thought, that must be a bit more modern, I might be able to relate to that. And I turned it to this page, and it was the Lord's grace to Paul. It's where the Apostle Paul's writing about how much grace God has shown him. And he says in there, "Although I was once a violent, blaspheming persecutor, God considered me trustworthy because I acted in ignorance and unbelief." And he then talks about being the worst of all sinners. And that's exactly how I felt. I thought nobody could be as vile as me. No one could be as filthy and sinful as me. But God still considers him trustworthy. So I thought, well, this is good news, isn't it? So I rang Wendy's uncle up and I said, this Bible book, when was it written exactly? He said, well, many years ago, Renton. Why is that? I said, well, because it's talking about me. I've opened up one page, it's talking about me. He said, well, that's wonderful, isn't it? He said, because that's what it does, you see. It's a living, breathing word of God. It's as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. And that really was the start of my journey.
So that's when you started to trust Jesus.
Totally.
And what he'd done.
Totally. I had nothing left of that I was interested in the world, and I was excited. I'm very much so. If I get involved in something,
you're all in.
I'm all in. I mean, I was all in as an hooligan. I was all in as, and so I was all in. And the next thing, I'm doing Christianity Explore courses, and the first one was in a pub in London, so that was handy. Like I mean, and doing that, and then also I got asked to go to Tanzania.
Wow. So things began to really change. So that's
totally.
A building project, was it, as well?
Yeah, project, building a house for the pastor.
Wow.
So off I goes there, and I just, wow. Yeah. And you know Jesus, he says, follow me, doesn't he, in his word. But it was starting to become about me again, you see, if I'm being honest. I think I was starting to tell, well, I'm going to go to Tanzania, you come with me, Jesus. And by the time I got home, I said to Wendy, we're going to be missionaries in Africa, Wendy. And she went, well, I don't want to be a missionary in Africa. I don't feel God's telling me to be a missionary in Africa. It's okay. I prayed about it, I said. What a load of old rubbish. And I prayed one night, and I think, I always felt God saying to me, you carrying away you are. It won't be Africa, you'll be back in Worm Scrubs, you carrying away you are. That's how it felt. I knew what I was all about, you see. And it was very true.
Yeah. And then things... So you're changing in lots of ways. There's still kind of battles you're having, because when you become a Christian, there's always battles. Yeah. You'd had a lifetime of violence and anger.
Yeah.
Did that completely disappear, or did it kind of rear its head again? How did that pan out?
You know, I was listening to a song this morning, I Surrender All. You know that song, I Surrender? It's a beautiful song, I Surrender All. And that's what's required of us. But it's not something we can do once. I'm learning that you have to do it every single day. Because you'll just fail if you don't. And every day you need to get on your knees and say, I'll surrender it all again, Lord. And I'd surrendered many, many things. Certain things I'd stopped completely. Certain things I'd stopped instantly. It was wonderful because I needed help with certain things. But the protection of my family was something I was hanging on to. I was very protective of my mum, very protective of my wife, and my wife had a tough time, and then my children. And people say, that ain't a bad thing, is it? But it all depends how you're going to protect them, you see. And that is what was going to lead me back into trouble, Mike. Really.
Yeah. So one of your sons, there's an issue, wasn't there, where he loaned some money to someone?
Yes, my youngest boy. The ironic thing, it was inheritance from Wendy's granddad. They'd all been left a few quid. And my son, thinking he's being half decent, lends it to this fella. About $3,500 he lends it. And this fella was a drug addict. So he was never going to get the money back, was he? And this fella even wrote a dodgy cheque out from his mum and dad's bank account once. Then my boy gets thrown out of the bank because he's producing this cheque, and that's just pressed every old button on my life. And I'm thinking, how dare you do that to my boy? And I went round to see his parents. He was about 19, 20 at the time, this lad. And I went round to see his parents, and I heard something similar to what Wendy had said to me. I remember going around and saying to her, you're lucky this wasn't 18 months ago, because I'll kill your boy. I'll kill him instantly. And I remember his mum saying to me, please don't kill my boy. Because we love him, but we don't like him. And it's just what I've been told by Wendy. She goes, he owes us $8,000. He goes, his granddad $14,000. He was just a mess, this lad. I said, well, do me a favour, get him out of the country or something, because if I see him, wasn't very Christian, was it? It wasn't very Christian of me to say things like that. I said, get him out of the country, because if I see him, he's going to be too much of a distraction. And they did. They moved him away, and then about 6 months later, he come back.
And what happened?
Well, he come back with a load of... he went out one night, and my boy's out in Dunstable in Bedfordshire, in a pub called a Sugarloaf, and my boy rings me up. He said, Dad, you've got to help me. He said, this fella's turned back up, he's got a load of mates with him, and I think I'm in trouble. So I remember putting the phone down. I remember saying to Wendy, I tease Wendy sometimes, I say it's her fault, but I put the phone down, I said to Wendy, what do I do? And she said, you better go and sort it out. Now, Wendy's sort out means go and get our boy, bring him home, let's love the hell out of him and we just pray for him. And my sort out was, it's the old way. And I remember sort of just coating myself up, arming myself up, and I'm thinking, that's it, I've had enough. This fella doesn't deserve to be around anymore. And I remember heading off to the pub, and I remember being outside, because the courtroom later on questioned me, what was you doing outside the pub? I said, I was praying. And of course they all looked at me like, yeah, of course you was praying. I said, I was praying. And then I could hear glasses smashing in the pub. And I remember going in, it was a double sort of level pub, split level pub. And I remember seeing the guy I wanted right at the very back. And he had two fellas with him, all wearing black they were. And I thought they were bouncers, like, you know. So I thought, I better clout one then first, and then I'll get him out the back. So I ran up and I hit the first one as hard as I could, and then realised he was a police officer. They were all police officers, and they were there to arrest him because he was dealing cocaine in the pub. And I've gone in there like drawn him.
So what did the police do? There's one down, the other one standing up.
Yeah, well they piled on me and they threw me to the floor. And I got up, and by that time the rage was in, and I was trying to grab this fella, and they threw me on the floor again. And then the third time they threw me on the floor, I had this big old jungle knife thing, and it bounced out of my pocket across the pub. I could hear all these people screaming, there's a madman in the pub, and I'm thinking, who are they talking about? Of course it's me. And of course they bundled me down and eventually arrested me. They arrested my boy as well, which is heartbreaking, you know, and we're in the cells next door to each other. And I remember being in there thinking that words that in the Bible it said God considered me trustworthy. And I remember saying to God in probably in anger one thing, just call this deal off because I'm just a waste of space. I'm an absolute waste of space. Now, I didn't hear any voices. I'm not going to start speaking about it. But I felt in my spirit that God said to me, you can do all things, Renton, but not by your own strength. Only by my strength. And I remember instantly saying to the police officers, can I have a Bible? I remember knocking on the door, give me a Bible, give me a Bible. And I remember them opening the door and they threw the Bible at me. And for a second I thought, how disgusting, you've thrown the Bible. And every time I get into that judgmental bit that I sometimes get into, God always reveals my sin before me. And it's always an awful lot more than someone throwing a Bible at them. And I remember thinking, and I remember them promising God, well, if you want me in prison, then let me serve you in prison. I remember making that promise to God there and then.
Wow.
You know.
So you felt really conflicted, everything was all over the show, you wanted to honour God, but then you wanted to deal with this guy, and it was all a mess, and there's conviction coming on over you. There's conviction in your heart. Was there a conviction legally as well?
Well, yeah, I remember going through a long old process, and sometimes what I struggle with, you mean that programme 24 Hours in Police Custody, you ever watch that on telly? It's normally in Luton, isn't it? and one of the CID fellas there is the one who was questioning me, and every time I see him I get a little twitch type thing. I remember being at this real conviction that I need to be honest. I've been to court and been to police stations all my life, and I've never told the truth once. I've lied every single time, you know. Put my hand on the Bible and lied in court every single time. But now I had this real conviction I need to tell the truth. And my barrister, who I knew she's going to be, you've got to stop all this honesty stuff, because they're going to destroy you. No, it's okay, I said, because it's okay, God's in control. She goes, well, they're going to charge you with attempted murder, Renton, the two people, and one of them's a police officer. You're facing a long term in prison here. I said, but I'm not guilty of attempted murder. I know what I'm guilty of. I know crime inside out. I know law inside out. I'm guilty of possessions of weapons with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Yeah. It's still a prison sentence, but it's not
attempted murder.
Not attempted murder. Certainly not of a copper. And she said, be careful, because when they're going to question you again, they're going to charge you attempted murder. And she said, if you do that, you've got to start going, no comment. And I'm going, no, it's okay. Because I said to him, if I lie to them, it's as bad as me. God doesn't see sin in levels, he sees sin as sin. You know, some people say, well, I ain't as bad as you, Renton. Well, sin is sin. And he said to me, we're going to charge you with attempted murder. I said, no. And then my barrister then started saying, look, I've done a deal with him. You plead guilty to attempted murder and we'll get you 4 to 6 years. But if you say plead not guilty, you're going to get 10 at least. I said, well, I'll take the 10. And because I said, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie anymore. I can't lie anymore. And it went through a long process, long time of being in locked up and then being released, which was amazing. That I spoke to legal people. I was charged with attempted murder of a police officer, and I eventually got bail. You mean you don't get bail for things like that, and that was a miracle in its own right. And eventually the judge spoke to counsel. They dropped the charge down to possession of weapons of intent. And eventually I said, well, now I'll plead guilty. And I was given a 2-year prison sentence. But it was suspended.
Okay.
So I was free to go. Yeah, it is. Can I just share something very quick?
Yeah, because time's running out. You go for it. Share the thing.
There's a wonderful verse in the Bible, Romans 8:28, where it says, God works for the good in all things for those who love him. And even in that mess, God can be at work, you see. And I had a dear friend of mine, Dave, me and Wendy, and we used to share the gospel with him all the time. And he used to say to me, I love reading the Bible, but I don't believe in God, he said. He said, I love that Romans 5. I love reading that, he said. I used to read it with my auntie. So anyway, when it comes to my final day of court, it's for a bail hearing, for the bail hearing. Wendy tried to contact him to say, look, and he said, Wendy, I'd love to come, but I've been waiting age, I've got to take the dogs to the vets, I've got to. I'm sorry, but I don't want to put the dogs before Renton, but I've got to. Wendy said, I understand. Anyway, 10 minutes later, he's at the door. When he goes, I thought you had to go to the vets. He said, it's really weird. He goes, because I put the phone down, and the phone rang again. It was the vets cancelling the vets. He goes, so I can be here. So he come to the courtroom, and there was loads of people from my church there. I've never felt so bad in my life. I think this is my world, not their world. These lovely, faithful Christians had all come to support me. And it broke my heart, really. And Eddie's there. He never wore a dog collar, but he put a dog collar on because he said it looked good, like in court. All these people were supporting me with dog collars on. There were about 15 of them, I think. And but Dave was there. And when I got granted bail, it was really what. If you've ever been in court, hopefully you haven't, but if you've ever been in court and you've got 2 guards, you're going back to Bedford Prison. That's where you're going to go. And I had Sandra and Ali. I got to know them. Sandra and Ali. And they sat there, and I thought, I've got 2 of them. And I said, why don't they keep me so late? She goes, well, you'll be going back to prison in a little while. And then the magistrate done summing up, and he said, I've heard about how you've changed your life, Renton. And then he said, the worst word you ever hear in court, he said, however. However, he said, I can't allow you to walk the streets. You're a danger to society. You're a violent man. And then all of a sudden he went, however, I grant you bail. And seriously, the clerk's type man, she's gone.
She stopped.
She stopped. Sandra, Sandra, the guard, started crying. Ali's, I don't know what he did, but he stood, and he said, and the clerk looked at him, he said, what's the matter? She said, bail conditions, because we'd offered up I'll move to a different area. Yeah, just stay away from this Mr. So-and-so. Stay away from him, and you report to the police station every evening. So we come out of the room, and my mate Dave is leaping around like some demented giraffe or something. I was leaping outside Luton Magistrates Court. And he's jumping up and down, and all he kept saying was, who was in that room? Not what happened, who was in that room. So one of the faithful Christian people said to him, that was the Holy Spirit, you see, Dave. That's the Holy Spirit. Well, Dave gave his life to Jesus outside that courtroom.
Oh, wow.
He gave his life out to Jesus right there and then 3 days later collapsed in Tesco's with a massive brain tumour and was given 3 months to live. Oh. And the first thing he said to me was, well, at least I know where I'm going now, don't I? He actually lived 5 years, Dave. He lived 5 years, and he was baptised, and it was wonderful. And
so even amidst all of the mess. And the sin and the evil, God did great things. And not to justify it, doesn't justify any of it, does it? But out of that deathly situation, he brought resurrection life, and it's so powerful to hear. And Renton, I'd love to ask you more, but time has run out, unfortunately. But Renton's got loads more great stories, and please, he's going to be hanging around, so please do chat to him afterwards. But shall we show our appreciation to Renton? Thanks so much. Brilliant. So we're going to, if I can find my, there we go, great stuff. We're going to just have a little think really about some of the kind of themes that come up. I think there's a great story which we're going to come on to in a moment from the Bible, which really speaks into the situation that Renton has spoken about tonight. And I want to consider this question that you had on the flyers you received, which is this question of, can I have peace? Maybe you don't have the kind of anger that Renton had, the way he described it. Maybe there's other anger going on inside your heart. Maybe there's just a lack of peace. Maybe there's just a restlessness going on right now. You're just troubled by what's going on in the world, what's going on in your life. The question is, can I have peace? And it often comes up in our life, I think, because we all know, if we're honest, like Renton got us to be honest at the start, we all know that we epically fail in different ways. We all fall, we all go flying over. I remember many years ago, I was running the youth group, and we took our youth group to paintballing. And paintballing was great fun. So if you end up with all these massive welts over you. And a good way into the day, we were ending up, our team anyway, our youth group and some others, we were looking a bit like Mr. Tumble's stunt doubles, because we were just spray painted everywhere with these things. We lost every game we played. It was embarrassing. And so our kind of leader, he got us all together, he got us round in a circle, and he said, come on guys, let's talk about this, let's plan for the next game, let's be strategic. And so I had this one guy in our youth group, and let's call him Hotshot. And Hotshot was there at the back of the circle, thinking about what was going wrong. And he considered that the reason why we were losing was because his trigger was a bit jammed. So he stood at the back of the circle, just working this out. And then he pinged the trigger. And everyone else was standing around this circle, and there's a poor guy about 50 centimetres away. And the trigger hadn't failed at all. And it worked beautifully this time. And it shot out at the speed of light. And it hit the poor guy in his left gluteus maximus. And, as that happens, you can see flocks of birds like fleeing the trees. Because his scream was so loud it would have made a soprano, jealous. It was just an embarrassing moment. And Hotshot epically failed in that moment. But he's not the only one. We all fail. We do silly things. Sometimes we accidentally get things wrong. And you drop your ice cream in your guide. Sometimes you accidentally get things wrong in your relationships. But so often we don't just accidentally get things wrong. Actually, we intentionally get things wrong because we've got a will to do something, and we won't stop unless that thing gets done. We talked one of the nights about how sometimes we say, the red mist descended and then I went for it. But the Bible's view is that actually the red mist never descends on us. Actually, it always ascends from us. It comes from deep within. And what I want to do is look at a story tonight where a guy has to admit actually that I don't just make accidental mistakes, I intentionally do things wrong. And so the question tonight is then, well, what do you do with that? What do you do when you're racked with guilt? What do you do when you know you've got things wrong, you've got life wrong, you've got your relationships wrong, you've not loved people as you should, you've not loved God as you should? What do you do in that situation? Well, I'm going to read a short story. It's from the Bible. It's from a biography we've been looking at some of the times this night, over the nights. It's from John's Gospel. And John was a good friend of Jesus, and he wrote down what happened when Jesus rocked up 2,000 years ago. And this is what it is. I'll explain it after I've read it. Listen to the story. So, I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So this is Peter, one of Jesus' followers, and some of his friends. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realise that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, well, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment round him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing a net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 metres. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it, and some bread. Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish you've just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So this comes at the end of John's biography, and we're told there it's the third time that Jesus had appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Jesus had died a bloody and violent death on a cross. He'd been butchered to death, and he was there paying for the sins of the whole world. All the things we've done wrong, all the things that Renton spoke about tonight that he's done, all the things I've done, the masses of things that we've all done in this world. Jesus is there paying for it. And then he was buried, and then 3 days later he rose again. And he showed that he was alive, because he showed up, he walked around showing people who he was. And he appeared at different times of day, morning, evening. He appeared to different groups of people, different numbers of people, men and women. He appeared in towns, in the countryside, by a lake. Loads and loads of different appearances to show he definitely was alive. And so this is now the third time he had appeared, and the disciples were out there on this Sea of Galilee. They were out fishing, doing what their trade was. And they could catch nothing. They were so bad at fishing at this particular juncture they couldn't even catch a cold. It was a bad day for them, and they were seasoned fishermen. And Jesus says, "Chuck your net over the other side." They do, and they get this huge haul of fish. And they know it must be Jesus who's telling them from the distant shore to do that, because earlier on Jesus had done something very similar and provided a whole bunch of fish. And then Peter, recognising it's Jesus, swims to the shore, and he's there dripping wet. And what does he see? He sees this little charcoal fire. And Jesus has got this fire going, and he's got fish on the go. And I love this, because this situation would have been huge for Peter. Because Peter would have been someone who was racked with guilt, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what Peter would have got from this charcoal fire was what you could term a fragrant flashback. Now, a fragrant flashback is when you get a waft of something, and you go, "I've got a big nose, so I get a waft of lots of things." But you get a waft of something, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that takes me back down memory lane." And this charcoal fire would have been a fragrant flashback for Peter. So you know the kind of thing, if you're walking down Bedford High Street or whatever, and you walk past a coffee shop, and you smell those roast coffee beans, and it takes you back down memory lane to that kind of first artisan coffee you once had with steamed Austrian goat milk. And you just remember, you go, "Oh yeah, I remember that one, it's beautiful." Or then you're walking down the street on a Friday night and the fish and chips waft up your nostrils, and it takes you back down memory lane. It gives you a fragrant flashback to your holidays as a kid down by the beach. Or you're walking in Sainsbury's or Morrison's, wherever you shop, and you get this waft of Old Spice as someone walks past you, and it takes you down memory lane. You go, "That was my history teacher, and my geography teacher, and my English teacher." In fact, all my teachers seem to love to marinate in the stuff. It just takes you back. Or you get Lynx deodorant going on, and this happens to me often. You smell it, and I remember it reminds me of year 10, and when all of us boys thought, you know what, the way we're going to deal with our BO is just to coat ourselves in Lynx. But we didn't realise it was a deodorant rather than an antiperspirant, so it couldn't actually stop the sweat. It just made for an unholy alliance with our BO. So it gives you a fragrant flashback. So you get the kind of picture. Well, Peter had one of these himself. He had a fragrant flashback from this charcoal fire. It would have just reminded him of something that had just happened a couple of weeks or so before. And it was a situation where the night before Jesus had died for us all. The night before, Jesus was in this garden called the Garden of Gethsemane. And it was there that Jesus was betrayed. But just before this, Peter had said to Jesus, "Do you know what, Jesus? I will die for you. I will do anything for you. I'll literally do anything for you. I will always be there for you." He was adamant that he would be there for Jesus. And he was quite confident, he was quite proud. He was like, "I can do this," so, strutting around. And, Renton was talking about he had a weapon on him when he went back to that pub. Well, Peter too had a weapon on him on that night, the night before Jesus was betrayed. He had a sword with him. But Peter actually used his sword. And when people came to arrest Jesus, Peter whipped out this sword and he slashed at some guy and he chopped off his ear. This guy was called Malchus, he was a servant guy. And you know what Jesus did? He picked up the ear and he stuck it back on and healed the guy, and it worked properly. We had an ENT surgeon the other day. He could only dream of powers like that. Sticking an ear back on, job done. But Jesus picks up this ear and sticks it back on the guy, and he's fully functional again. And Peter had done that thing, and Jesus had actually brought some life out of that deathly situation. But as the story goes on, what you find is Jesus is arrested and he's taken to this courtyard where he's being tried really badly and illegally at this particular time. He's been accused of all manner of things, and yet he's innocent. He, the innocent one, is there for us guilty. And Peter follows at a distance to go and see what happens. And as Peter goes into the courtyard, what does he find? Well, he's sat round a charcoal fire. And he would have been warming himself there, he would have been smelling that stuff and undoubtedly going up his nostrils. But it was around that fireplace that Peter did something that he would be racked with guilt with for a long time. And it was this: he had said, when people said, "You are a follower of Jesus," he said, "No, I'm not. I'm not a follower of Jesus." He denied it. And then some other person came in and said, "Yes, you are. We can tell you're a northerner. You've got a northern accent. You say grass instead of grass, that kind of thing. We can tell you're northern. You're one of his followers, aren't you?" He said, "No." And then someone else comes along and says, "Yeah, you're definitely one of his followers." And then a cockerel crows. And Jesus had predicted to Peter, "You know what, when that cockerel crows on the third, it'll be the third occasion you've denied me." And Peter realises what's happened. And we're told in those gospel accounts, in Mark's gospel version of it, where Mark says that what happens is that Jesus' eyes, he was over there in the courtyard, over on the other side. And Peter was over this side. And Jesus' eyes and Peter's eyes met. And as they met, Peter got up from that fireplace and he ran outside. And this was a big, solid, burly fisherman. Probably one of the kind of football hooligans of the day. He was this big guy, solid guy, tough guy, hardened by life. And what we're told that happened? Well, he wept bitterly. He was out there just weeping bitterly. He realised he was a failure. My wife Cecilia, we have to eat quite a few gluten-free things. And he was like a kind of gluten-free biscuit. He realised, I'm like that, I'm crumbled. The pressure came, I just snapped and I crumbled. And I faded away, I melted away. And he must have, no doubt, been just absolutely gutted. Because he realised that in that moment, he had done something huge. He had betrayed his good friend. He had betrayed the one that he knew was God in the flesh. And there's an old word that we sometimes hear kind of battered around. Renton would have had it thrown at him by his religious studies teacher in the Bible. It's a word, transgression. And it's exactly what Peter was experiencing here, what he had done. Because to transgress, it means to break trust. It means to break relationship. And here was Peter realising that I have transgressed, I have broken relationship with the God who loves me and has come into this world for me. And he thought in his life, he'd been strutting around loads of times thinking he got it together, he could dance to the right tune. But here he was, wonky, out of kilter, not the way he knew he should be. And Peter was then wrestling with immense guilt. He felt guilt because of what he'd done. He felt shame because of who he was. He thought, I'm better than this. I shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't have done that. And I wonder if you have ever had that kind of level of just kind of guilt and shame, where you feel trapped, you feel like you're stuck in a corner, there's no windows over there at all, you can't get out. Or you feel like a butterfly trapped against the window, there's no way of escape, because you're just full of guilt and shame because of the things you've done. It may be one particular thing you can think of, but so often we are like that, just trapped by our own guilt and shame, thinking we were better than what we were, and gutted that we did what we did. What do you do? Well, Jesus does something profound. He, weeks later, after he dies and rises from the dead, he prepares a charcoal fire that gives Peter a fragrant flashback back to that time when he betrayed him. Why? Is Jesus being alright? What's it here? Is he trying to grab Peter's snout and just rub it in the muck and the mire of what he's just done? And you go, just read Jesus, look at him in the biographies, you go, that ain't the kind of God he is. He's a good God who loves you. So what's Jesus doing when he's getting this fire going? If I was Jesus in this moment, I think if someone had betrayed me like that, there were 153 large fish they caught. I think I would have picked up one of them and given him an almighty slap around the face that way and that way, and then come up with some really bad dad jokes to annoy the person and say, I've had enough of you, I'm going to batter you and all this kind of stuff. I know, it's not a time or a place. But anyway, and he does it anyway, but he doesn't do that, sorry. That's exactly what I would do, but Jesus doesn't do that. Instead, Jesus gets his fire out, I think, to do two things. To really, firstly, help Peter see what he had come into this world to do. You see, that charcoal fire is there to say, Peter, there is forgiveness for you. And when Jesus gives him that fragrant flashback, what he's wanting him to do is he wants Peter to face the truth. He wants Peter to be honest and go, look, I did mess up. And the reason why Jesus wants us to see the way we've messed up, the way we've sinned, the way we've intentionally sinned and got things wrong, is again not because he wants to rub our noses in it, but it's because it's only when we see what we've done wrong and that there's no way out and that we need forgiveness and there's no one to forgive us. It's only when we're in that dark spot there, in that dark corner, it's only then that we'll admit actually there is someone who can do something about it. And that we'll be at that place where we're ready to say, I need forgiveness and I need to turn to the one who offers it. And when Jesus died on the cross, he was paying for all of what Peter had done wrong. 700 years before Jesus died on that cross and rose again, there was a prediction by a guy called Isaiah, who was one of these spokespersons for God. And what he said about what Jesus was doing was this. He said, but he, Jesus, was pierced for our transgressions. For all those ways that we've broken relationship with God. For all those ways that we've broken trust with him and not loved him as we should and not loved others as we should. Jesus is saying that I died for that. And when we think about the worst things we've done, and even the less worse things that we've done, in our view anyway, do you know what? Jesus will forgive absolutely anything. And even if right now you're going, well, what about that? There's no way. Jesus says, no, my blood is big enough, it's powerful enough to forgive even the worst thing you've ever done wrong. And Jesus said, Peter, the fire is there to say, look, yeah, you've done wrong, but I forgive you. That's why I just died for you. That's why I'm alive right now, because I'm offering you that forgiveness. So the fire firstly means there's forgiveness. But the second thing, and I'll end on this, the second thing that fire means as well is something else. Because Jesus says something huge to Peter. He's got this fish going on the fire. Remember, Peter couldn't do anything to sort out the lack of fish. Jesus provides everything he needs. And Jesus is there with this fish. And he says to Peter and to the others who have also sinned as well, he says, listen, come and have breakfast. And those words, I think, are beautiful. Come and have breakfast. Because we all love breakfast, whether it's a sausage and egg muffin from McDonald's, or whether it's a fry-up, or that kind of posh stuff over there. Whatever kind of breakfast, that's that cool, come and have breakfast, is just a beautiful thing. Because here is the God of the universe saying to sinners, to people who've got life wrong, I want to feast with you. And when you feast with someone, you're sat around the table, you're sat around together, wherever you may be, and you're on a level playing field. You're at a place where you say that our relationship is back on. We enjoy each other, we know each other, we can laugh, we can cry together. And here is Jesus offering that to Peter and say, come, look, you're forgiven, and that means you can feast with me now. And that's one of the things I think sometimes people get wrong about Christianity. Sometimes we think it's come and get forgiven, and that's it. And then you get a ticket to heaven one day. And certainly you do get that ticket to heaven. That is absolutely true. But forgiveness isn't the goal. Forgiveness is the means. Forgiveness is the means. It brings you into what? It brings you into the come and have breakfast moment where you can feast with the God who made you, where you can know him. That's the point of being forgiven. So that actually then Jesus will be the one who leads you, will be the king of your life, and will lead you and love you forevermore. And Jesus offers that to him. And he offers that to us too. You notice what Jesus doesn't do? He doesn't come here at Peter in a rage and say, Peter, get your act together, sort yourself out. He knows he can't, and he knows we can't either. He doesn't say, come and get your act together, pull yourself together. In fact, he says something very different. He says, drop the act and come and be together with me. Drop the act. Give up this kind of external show. And Renton had talked about what's on there on the outside. Give that up. Admit what's going on the inside. Come to me and you will be forgiven. For I died for you and I rose for you. And I love you and I long for you to be in relationship with me. And Jesus offers that for you tonight. He offers you forgiveness so that you can come and metaphorically have breakfast with him and know him forever. And tonight, I don't know where you're at. Some of you might be at a place where you're going, this is all really interesting stuff. I've been hearing what the Lord's done in Renton's life and how he's a work in progress and the Lord's changing him and they've done amazing things and forgiving him and given him a great wife called Wendy and a great pastor as well. And maybe you're thinking, this is all intriguing. Well, go and find out more. Please do. There's lots of books around to go and find out more. Come back to church. Come and hear more about Jesus. But others of you, I think, we're here tonight going, actually, yeah, this has really got to me now. I know I'm a sinner. I know I'm someone who needs forgiving. And I know Jesus died. I know he's risen. I believe that. Well, why don't you ask him tonight, come and forgive me and come and be Lord of my life? each night we're offering just an opportunity at this juncture to go, let's pray, let's go and do it now. Let's do business with God now and say, God, please will you come and forgive me. And if that's the place that you're at tonight, why not pray with me now? And what it means is I'm going to talk to God, and if you agree with this, then make, in the words of Louis Walsh on X Factor, make these words your own. Try and make them your own. Say like, yeah, this is what I really mean. And if they're really what you think and what you mean, then Jesus will forgive you, and he will come and be your Lord right here and now. If you're up for that, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for what we've heard tonight. Thank you for Renton's story, a story that speaks of your kindness and your grace. Father, tonight I've realised that it's not just Renton, but I too am a sinner. And I too need your forgiveness. And I thank you tonight that Jesus came and he died. He was pierced for my transgressions, the ways I got things wrong and broken relationship with you. Thank you that he rose again so that right now he can forgive me and can give me a relationship with you. So Father, please right now, would you forgive me? And please right now, would you give me your Son, Jesus, so that I might know you from now and forevermore. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Great. If you prayed that, come and chat to me, chat to Renton, chat to Nick, chat to whoever you know. But I'm going to shut up and pass back to you. Thanks.